Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I'm joined by the amazing Andrew Scott Bell. Andrew, how you doing today, man?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing very well, a lot better now that we are finally making this happen. So, before we talk about the reason that you're here, I would like for the people that don't know you to get to know you a little bit. Andrew grew up in upstate New York, where he found himself taking dance, ballet, and piano lessons. Life eventually took him to Christopher Newport University in Newport News, Virginia, where he studied classical orchestration, music theory, and composition. Now, what I love about this is you got your interest and love in scoring music from one of what many people would call the greatest movie of all time. And if not the greatest movie of all time, one of the greatest performances of all time in Forrest Gump. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came to be?
Yeah. Oh, I love that movie. And I don't exactly remember how old I was. I think maybe I was like 7 or 8. But my parents bought the soundtrack CD, and it was mostly like Bob Dylan songs and Creedence Clearwater Revival, stuff like that. It was all of the like rock songs and stuff that were like featured in the movie because that movie spans multiple decades. So it has a great
Sure.
soundtrack of a bunch of different rock songs from all from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. But the last track on the second disc was a suite of orchestral themes from the film's original score by Alan Silvestri. And I just remember finding that, you know, kind of by mistake, and it like putting like lightning sparks in my brain. And I just like I took my CD player from my bedroom and I like brought it downstairs for like, multiple weeks and had it set up on the upright piano just so I could learn how to play by ear. I still know how to play it. It's like burned in my brain.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's something that I'll never forget how to play because it was such like a pivotal moment in my, I guess, musical awakening or inspiration. It was kind of the origin story, if you will, of my interest in film. And I mean, of course, like there were Disney movies growing up, and my parents would we'd come home from a movie or something. We'd see some movie at the theaters, and they'd say like, "What was your favorite part?" And according to them, I would say, oh, I love that part where they're going on the bicycle and then the music does this thing and goes na 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 na, and they're like, yeah, and like so describing the movie that I'm telling them about in musical ways. So I think I had always had a love and interest in music, but finding that soundtrack, the Forrest Gump soundtrack, and then engaging with it and learning how to play it and pressing play, hitting rewind, pressing play again, trying to figure out what note that is, hitting
Yeah.
rewind, pressing play again. That was just such a great way to kind of just like kickstart my love of writing music, I think, and my interest in it. So
And I love it because Ashley, especially for anybody that watches the show, they know how important a score is to Ash. Ash always talks about how a score can make or break a film. And when she was doing her research into her deep dive of Halloween, Carpenter couldn't sell the film. He couldn't get
hmm
anybody to sell the film. He wrote that iconic piano line, and
yeah,
yeah, he
yeah,
he sold the film like a week later. Like
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
enhanced what he was trying to do. So the score can make or break a film in a lot of times. And you began scoring films back in 2009. In 2015, you finally moved to LA, where you scored Rocket, a short film, won you a Student Academy Award the following year. Like that to me is super, super impressive. But since then, you've earned credits for Home Sweet Home, Death Chamber, or is it Deathcember? Deathcember,
December.
not
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Deathcember. Lifetime's Psycho Storm Chaser and Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey as well. So
hmm
not only are you scoring films, you are scoring many different, like wide varieties of films. So I know this may be a tricky question, but do you have a certain type of film that you have a preference for when it comes to scoring?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I've thought about this a lot recently because a friend of mine was asking me, like, what is it like? What's your favorite genre? And it's just so hard to kind of pick like a favorite genre. I think that when he and I were talking about it, we kind of discovered that maybe I don't have a favorite genre. I mean, I love working on horror movies. I have a really, I have a love for like family adventure, like E.T., and that's what Rocket was really kind of. The first time I worked on a movie that I felt like I could share it with my niece and nephew of a certain, they
Sure.
were a certain age at the time, is 7 and 4, I think. Um, but in that conversation, talking about like family adventure and action and horror and sci-fi, we kind of realized that maybe I don't have a favorite genre, but instead I like to work on movies that are like above, that stretch the characters like above and beyond like our normal daily lives. And a lot of films do that, but a lot of other films don't. A lot of
Mhm.
films don't put their characters through, you know, above and beyond what we experience in a normal day life. And I've enjoyed scoring those movies too. I mean, obviously like dramas have their certain flair to them, but when characters are going through, kind of an adventure of some kind, whether it's a horrifying adventure or a fun adventure, those are the moments where I feel like music has a lot of fun to play. And a lot of the movies that I loved growing up were those types of movies. E.T., but scored by John Williams, and The Rocketeer, scored by James Horner. All of those
Yeah.
those fun. And then horror movies are obviously a really fun sandbox to play in. You got a lot of get a lot of fun tools.
Right. One thing I do want to point out, it's funny how you're like, I really like to, score character driven movies, and I like to do movies with huge character arcs. And you started that with Forrest Gump. Is there any other movie that could have been a bigger character study or
Oh, I
character
know.
arc? Like, it's just funny how like that's where it started, and that's where you continue to grow, and that's where you feel like you put in the most. I don't want to say the most effort. I know you put 100% into every single thing you do, but
Yeah.
that's what really swells your violin, so to speak, is when you're doing
Yeah.
something that is close to what you love. And starting with Forrest Gump, and then still want. There's something in our brain. My first horror movie was House. Possession type movies are still my favorite.
Oh,
So
yeah,
I
yeah,
think that
yeah.
when you have, the thing that got you started on wanting to work on this was Forrest Gump. So in your brain, you still have that. I want to do something with a huge character that has a lot, whether it's one character or multiple characters, and the bigness of what they
Mm,
can do. Humanism is so funny to me, like how
yeah.
our brains can do these type of things. And um, another thing that I want to talk about real quick, because I'm super, super proud of you, man. You were
Thank
commissioned to
you.
write an opera based on the Nobel Prize winning author Elie Wiesel's award winning play, The Trial of God.
Mm,
Now, look, scoring a short film is a huge deal. It is. It's amazing. Scoring a film, incredible. Being able to be commissioned to write an opera, that's fucking gigantic, dude.
yeah. It
And
was. It
I know
was.
you and
Thank
I
you.
just recently started communication with each other, but I'm one of those people that latches on fast, man. And when I was reading this, I was so damn proud of you. And I can only imagine what that must feel like for you as a composer, as someone that we see Andrew playing the piano, which he's amazing at, but violin, cello, trumpet, clarinet, like this dude does everything. And to be commissioned into writing an opera based on such an award-winning thing, dude, incredible. So proud of you, so happy for you. What was it like to get that notice that you were in on this?
Oh my God. Well, first of all, thank you for that. It was a really impactful and meaningful project to me, and it was the project of my life. I mean, I poured everything I had into it. It came at a really fortunate time. It came right in the middle of the pandemic when films were kind of slowing down. Um, my alma mater, Newport University, reached out to me, and they had this kind of program. They were starting a Jewish studies program at the university, and they wanted to kick it off with like this big event. And then part of that event was going to be premiering a brand new opera alongside a children's opera named Brundabar, which was actually written and performed in I can't remember which one of the camps during the Holocaust. It was written by a Jewish composer. They had musicians in this camp. I can't remember the name of it. I'm a little bit embarrassed. I can't remember the name of it, but it was one of the camps. It was the camp that the Nazis would use for propaganda. They would send camera crews to this camp because it was like on the surface people were, in regular outfits and going to like work, and
It
like
wasn't Oscar, was it?
I don't think I don't think so. No, it was like a camp within a city. And
Okay.
like so they had like concerts, and like they would put on these big shows, bring the camera crew, and then when the camera crew would leave, they would all go back to like the real camp, you know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like so anyways, this so they put this operetta that I was commissioned to write alongside that. They played that one first and then this one, so it was kind of like a double presentation one night as part of this big introduction of the Jewish Studies program. And the play, The Trial of God, written by Elie Wiesel, is an incredible story about questioning faith and God, and how God would let this happen to the Jewish people. And of course, it doesn't take place during the Holocaust. It was kind of like loosely written about the Holocaust, but it takes place during another time in history, when Jewish people were being sought out and murdered and killed by Christians, actually, in like Eastern Europe, hundreds and hundreds of years before the Holocaust, because the Holocaust and those pogroms and what the Jewish people are experiencing now, like everything, it's just the continuation of the same thing throughout history.
Yeah.
Where and not to get too far into the history of that, I just dove right in, and I was just so honored to be asked to write this. I studied a lot about Elie Wiesel and who he is as a person and what he was trying to say in this play, and I just tried to give my whole heart to it. So I appreciate very much your compliments, because that was a really impactful project for me, and it's a part of my, like, it doesn't really exist outside of the performance that it was given at the school, because one of the play itself is not in the public domain. So the school got permission from Elie
Sure.
Wiesel's family to adapt it into an opera, but only under the stipulation that it would be performed only at the school and for no ticket sales. So it was like all 4 nights were completely sold out, but there was no fees or whatever. It was a
Sure.
completely free performance. And I have a personal video of it that I have for myself, but I can't release it. So I put everything I had into it, and I'm very proud of it. And I hope one day to be able to put that music out into the world for others to experience, because the people who came up to me afterwards, after each performance, but especially the first premiere night, this packed house, some of the families had members who had survived the Holocaust, and the way that they hugged me and they came up to me after the performance was a profound experience I will never forget.
Yeah.
So,
and like I said, as a composer, film and television, that's huge. It is. I would never want to downplay any project, big or small. But when you get the chance to write an opera, like that's our, as an actor, that's your Academy Award. Like that's the big time for you. That's working with Scorsese. Like that's, and I'm over the moon happy for you. Like when I was doing this biography, that's the part that really stood out to me, because I could only imagine how special that was for you to get that call. So I wanted to bring that up, and
yeah,
maybe
thank you.
someday. No, of course, Andrew. Like seriously, that's special. That's something that not a lot of us can say. And the best way for you guys to be able to keep up to date on if he can ever put this into the public domain and show us anything is by following him on social media. And the best thing is you don't have to go far, because those links are right down in the description. So, like you said, he's done everything from Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, to creating his own opera. So the guy's not done. He's going to have a lot more projects coming up. So if you want to hear some of the things he has coming up in the future, make sure you're clicking these links and following him on social media. So you did do the score for Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, a horror film. But in order for you to score horror films, Andrew, horror had to start for you somewhere. So
Yeah.
now I'd like to go back to the past and talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And funny enough, anybody that knows this movie knows how iconic the score is.
Yeah,
So,
that's true. That's
Andrew,
good.
your
That's
first
true.
horror movie was?
My first horror movie that I remember was Jurassic Park, and I know some might, there will be battles in the comments on whether or not Jurassic Park is a horror movie, but I stand firmly in the camp that Jurassic Park is a horror movie.
I will
especially
fight
some
to
of
the
those.
death the
Oh
Jurassic
yeah,
Park horror movie.
I mean, it has some adventure elements to it, but there's that whole third act with the raptors. Like there is some absolute, actual horror setups that are in that, and then the T Rex scene is an absolute horror setup. But yeah, I've seen people argue about Alien versus Aliens and whether those are horror movies, and can you have a horror movie in space, or is it just I've seen these kind of debates, and I'm always like, if it scares you and it's meant to scare you, I think it's got some elements of horror movie. So yeah.
Not just that, but man, the Raptors are a total slasher trope
Oh
all
yeah.
throughout. Like there's so many different scenes throughout Jurassic Park where those Raptors, if you put a guy with a kitchen knife in their hands, it's a
Right.
slasher all the way. So like
And
I
if you
remember
if
when
you swapped out the shot of the hook, the toes tapping for like boots stomping,
yeah,
it'd be a total shot from a horror movie. The way
it
that
is.
those
And
claws come into, yeah.
yes, and I remember when Jurassic Park came out, Fangoria put Jurassic Park on the cover and people were
Yeah.
pissed. And it's like, so you guys were okay with Jaws being on the cover and being hailed as one of the greatest horror movies of all time, but not this one because it was super mainstream. And Steven Spielberg also did Jaws, just like he
Right.
did
Right.
Jurassic Park. And because it's dinosaurs and it's fantasy, like there's still so many horror elements throughout this movie. But do you remember who you were with the first time you had seen it?
Yeah, I love telling the story because it's a fun story. I grew up in upstate New York, as you mentioned, and up there during the summer, I mean, we had one movie theater in the mall, but during the summer there was a second movie theater that opened up. It was a drive-in movie theater. It was only open during the summer because it would get too cold with the
Mm-hmm.
snow and stuff like that. Um, and on Saturday nights during the summer, they would do like a double feature kind of a deal for like families. So they would start with like a G or a PG movie, and then they would pair it with a PG-13. And I think, yeah, yeah. So if I remember correctly, it was my parents would take us to those nights, and if I remember correctly, the movie that we went to watch, because the idea is like the kids will watch the G movie, the Disney movie,
And
or the
fall asleep.
PG, and fall asleep, and then mom and dad can watch, I don't know, Forrest Gump or whatever other PG-13 movie. It's not rated R. They had rated R nights on Fridays and stuff, but so if I remember correctly, we were watching Free Willy, and there's nothing against Free Willy. It was a fun movie, but my brother and I fell asleep in the back of the station wagon, and and we woke up. At least I woke up in the back seat of our car while the T-Rex was like terrorizing the kids in that scene. So, he's like smashing through the sunroof, and like they're in the back seat and I'm in the back seat. It was a very impactful way to watch your first kind of splash at horror movie, because I didn't watch a lot of horror movies, growing up. But that one was thrust upon me because I woke up in the middle of it in a very dramatic way,
Right.
literally in the shoes of the characters that I woke up to. And so I just stayed awake in the back. Like, I don't think my parents even knew. I was just like quietly watching. And then of course, like not it's not like a horror movie all the way through. There's fun adventure. And I think like 6 years old. So I was just like thrilled with this. It's just like the most exciting thing I'd ever seen.
Right. So would you say that T-Rex scene was the one that affected you the most?
Yeah, and of course the Raptor scene too. That was another moment that was just like, I felt like I was holding my breath the whole time. I just remember being so quiet in that scene because the weird thing. I mean, it's not weird, but the coincidence of that movie is that those two scenes that are maybe the biggest and most frightening, the most horror like. I mean, I guess you could argue the Sam the arm coming down, and
Yeah.
that was pretty horror too. But I think when people think like whether or not Jurassic Park is a horror movie, the two scenes that stand out to them are the T-Rex scene and then the kitchen scene and both of those are, featuring like kids around the same age that I was at the time watching it. So I think those two kind of smacked me right in the face, but they're so, such great scenes.
Well, and you have that moment, like I said, total slasher, when you get the raptor coming up to that circle window and his
Yeah.
breath is hitting the window. Like yeah, that's a slasher. That if I mean, even in Halloween H2O, they have that direct reference where they have that circle window and Michael and Laurie are looking in at each other. You know, like
Yeah.
there's so many references throughout horror that are just so subtle. And
Gotta
you as
tell
a
you,
musician, go ahead.
Halloween H2O, my favorite of the Halloween scores, and I know a lot of it was ripped from Scream, but
Mhm.
the way that oh my god, I can't remember his name. I'm blanking on his name, but the composer for that film took Carpenter's original theme and orchestrated it for orchestra. I
Yeah.
just is delightful for me as a person who loves writing
Mhm.
for traditional orchestra. So, anyways, I interrupted you. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Something that I found interesting, 'cause I'm a sucker for special features, behind the scenes, making ofs, all that. And something I thought was really crazy was they took days and days and days to figure out how to make that water ripple in the
Yeah,
cup when the T-Rex is coming up. Do you know how they did that?
I do. But for the purpose of the audience, go ahead and
Yeah.
share.
What they did was they took a guitar string and they tied it to the bottom of that cup and strung it down, and they
Hmm.
were plucking the
Yeah,
guitar string, and that gave it that ripple effect.
the
And I
ripple
thought,
from
like,
the inside out. It was
yes,
important for the
that
not
was
just for
that
the
was
water to
important to go
shake, but to make a
from the
ring.
inside
Yeah.
out. Yes.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I thought that was so impressive when I was watching the behind the scenes. I was like, that's genius. You know, these
Yeah.
people, like the little things that we see in the movie, the amount of time and effort it takes to make something so small happen. And it's
Hmm.
so that's Spielberg. You know what I mean? That's
Hmm.
that's why Spielberg is Spielberg, because of the attention to every single detail. So
Oh, for sure.
um we know what scene it was that affected you the most. But did you have a favorite scene from Jurassic Park?
I mean, I've seen the movies hundreds and hundreds of times since, but I'm trying to remember in that moment my favorite scene. Like my favorite scene, like when I watched it as a kid and in the
Or even
drive-in,
now?
or even now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, I think it still has to be that T-Rex scene. When I rewatch the movie, that's the scene that leaves me in awe, and not
Mhm.
just the way that they set it up earlier with the goat and everything, and then the goat, you know.
It's just gone.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they set it up earlier where the T-Rex doesn't even, like they make that setup where he doesn't eat the goat and they just keep driving, right?
Yeah.
So you already kind of are your brain is like, oh, this will come back, and not only in the way that it's like filmed and paced and edited, but the VFX in the T-Rex scene. I mean, obviously all the animatronic stuff is incredible, and the way that they had to shoot that and keep like pausing to like wipe down the T-Rex because
Mhm.
it got too heavy, um, is amazing. But the visual effects, which were like brand new, brand spanking new at the time, like hold up better than most of like the best examples of CGIs, even
Dude,
like 10, 15 years later.
so
And,
true.
and it's hard to compare it to, because I know how stressed and overworked the um, VFX workers are right now in terms of Disney. So I know that there's a good reason for like VFX in like recent Marvel movies to be not quite up to snuff. Like I see a lot of people compare like VFX from the eye of Doctor Strange in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, and they'll compare that to like um what's his name from Pirates of the Caribbean 3 with all the tentacles.
Oh,
Oh, Davy
yeah.
Jones. And I understand they're saying like we're going backwards, but there's a reason for that. Like VFX workers are like overstressed and underpaid, and I'm so proud of them all. For some of them
Mhm.
I know recently have this success now where they just like voted to unionize. So hopefully that'll help and give
Yeah.
the workers some time to actually do the job that is.
And be able to feed their damn families.
Yeah, that absolutely. The time and appropriate budgets, because everyone's just getting squeezed. But even if you compare like Davy Jones, which I think a lot of people like hold up as like the pinnacle peak of CGI, to like the T-Rex in 1993.
5.
I thought it was 93, Jurassic
It
Park.
might be 93. I thought it was 93 or
But even
95.
if it's 90,
Yeah.
even if it's 95, that's like almost like 15 years later or something like that. Like it holds up in such a way that is astounding to me. Like they made a deal with the devil or something for that movie, because it
Yeah.
is.
Because
I-
even the
I-
4K version of this is wonderful.
yeah,
You
and I
know?
think it comes down to not trying to push the, like, you know, I think it comes down to not trying to push the CGI to do something that it's not good at. But
Right.
and because they used a lot of like shadow and a lot of darkness and like what you see when the flashes of light in that T-Rex scene. But then again, like as I'm saying this, I'm thinking about the scene where they're like running away from the herd, and the herd is like jumping over the downed trees, and that's in broad daylight, and it still looks incredible. So I don't know how they figured it out, what they did. I do know maybe the difference is they had stop frame animation animators as part of the process, and maybe that has something to do with movement. I don't know.
The perfect mix between practical and special effects in this movie. Because like you said, a lot of the puppets, a lot of the animatronics, they really did handle it very well. Like the part where Ellie's down in the basement and she's so happy because it comes on, another slasher moment, and the raptor comes up right behind her head.
Right behind her. Yeah.
Like that's another moment that's that's Jason Voorhees coming right behind her.
Right,
like that's what I think when I think of this. So I always got to ask, because Jurassic Park is a franchise. I include Jurassic World in the Jurassic Park franchise.
Yeah, me
to me,
too.
they're all the Jurassic films. But now that we've gotten so many different of these movies, I got to ask, is the first one your favorite in the franchise? And if not, which one is?
By far, the Jurassic Park is my favorite, and not far behind it is The Lost World, which also was Steven Spielberg. Super fun. I loved that John Williams it's a totally different island. Aside from one character, it's a totally different cast.
Yep.
And he just, I think, I don't know. He's had so many sequels. Maybe he was eager to do this, but having just scored a sequel, Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2, I was so excited and so eager to revisit themes that I had written for the first film and tweak them and modify them and play them in interesting new ways as the characters are changing and the different circumstances are arising for them. And I was just this is my first sequel, so I was so excited to be part of a franchise like that. But for him, he didn't write that. And my music in Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey is by far nowhere near the icon status of Jurassic Park. So for him to like do a sequel to Jurassic Park, which is like one of his finest works, and be like, and I think I'm not going to use any of the themes I wrote that people love from the first movie, and I'll just start from scratch and give you a whole new sound palette and sonic quality to this new sequel, was a bold move. And I, having just worked on a sequel, like that must have been hard for him to be like totally new soundtrack. But in fact, like Jurassic Park, my favorite one in the franchise, in terms of film. Lost World, my favorite score in the franchise.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think The Lost World is extremely underrated.
Yeah.
I love The Lost World. I agree with you. The OG will always be my favorite. Daddy Goldblum, he's amazing, and I love the whole film. But it'll always have a very special place for me. Now, Andrew, we've talked about your first horror movie, Jurassic Park, and what that means to you. We've talked a little bit about your life, but I want to throw a little bit of a curveball at you here for a second. My little buddy Ghostface is here, and he has a question for you. What's your favorite scary movie, Andrew? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
Favorite horror movie of all time? That's a great question. It's a tough question. Because my first instinct is to say Psycho. As you mentioned in my bio, like I didn't go to school for film scoring. I went for traditional, classical studies like orchestration and music theory, not connected to film at all. But I knew I wanted to write music for film and TV since I was a kid. So I just didn't have the in-state school. There was no in-state school at that time in the mid-2000s that had a film scoring program. I'm sure maybe one of them does now. I could have gone to Berkeley or something like that, but I wanted to, for myself personally, and my family, I wanted to pick an in-state school and get that in-state tuition. And there just wasn't. So I tried to make my own version of a film scoring program, which was, to me, major in music composition and music theory and minor in film studies. And one of my favorite classes from school There were lots that I enjoyed. I really enjoyed post-tonal music theory, but my favorite class was from my minor, and it was with a professor who was like a Hitchcock aficionado, like
Yeah.
studied the deepest details of everything in Hitchcock. And he wasn't even a professor. He was the was it prohost or provost?
Mhm.
I don't know how to say it, but he was like, like just under the dean or whatever, in terms of like, he was part of, not, he wasn't a teacher. He taught
Sure.
this class just for fun. And we studied all of Hitchcock's films. And when we got to Psycho, we had to choose, you know, what we were going to write about in Psycho. And I decided I wanted to write a cut by cut, as the pun intended, analysis of the shower scene. So not only like cut by cut, as in like the stabbing, but every edit, every slice of
Mhm.
edit, and talk about the intention between every edit and what the music was doing at that time. So essentially, like, where I could have just very easily written, this is very indicative of who I am, I guess. Somebody was telling me this recently. I could have very easily just written a paper about the edit of that scene, but instead I had to also write like an additional paper inside the paper about the music. But that gave me such an appreciation for that film and Hitchcock in general. And when I think about where we are even still as composers for horror films, we're still playing in so many ways an homage to what Bernard Herrmann did in Psycho, where he just revolutionized and changed the way we think about horror movie music.
Mhm.
Those orchestral violin stabs, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 and the way that they like pierced through the audience and like terrified them, when combined with the visuals of the mother coming, with the knife.
Yeah.
I think that we are still, echoing from the influence of that shocking bit of music still today. You think about like Insidious is another one that's in my top favorite horror movies because of an experience I had watching it for the first time. The music in Insidious and the title card, just like that shrieking violins right at the top of the movie, just setting the
Yeah.
stage for everything we're about to experience. So I think, to me, my favorite movie is Psycho still, because it was just like, it started it all. It started the slasher craze.
Mhm.
I mean, that lasted so long. Um, yeah, it's like
Well, see, and it's funny because I've said numerous times on here, and this again, just my opinion. I think that Psycho, Jaws, and Halloween 1978
yeah,
are quintessential because even if people have not seen these movies, they know those scores. They know the they know the
yeah,
ba-dum, ba-dum. They know that. They know the they know
yeah,
that, even if they've
yeah.
never
It's true.
seen these movies. And how important of a score do you have if people that have never seen your movie can recognize what the movie is just by hearing the score?
Yeah,
That's fucking incredible.
that's
That's an
pivotal. Yeah.
honor. So, again, I've had an amazing time talking to you about all this stuff. But before I let you go, we always bounce back to the same question. And we're going to go back to Jurassic Park. And what we're going to do, Andrew, is rank this movie on a skull count. Now, we're not ranking it on acting, production, score, direction. We're not being critics. What we're doing here is strictly ranking Jurassic Park on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So, 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. Andrew, what would your ranking of Jurassic Park be?
I think it's got to be a 5 skulls for me. I guess if I, because just how, when I'm even just thinking about thinking back to some of the answers I gave in this interview about like, uh, what kind of genres I like to score, and how the answer I gave there in terms of like, extra human, like putting characters through these huge, outrageous, crazy circumstances in the story. Like, I think it had a tremendous effect on my tastes and preferences about what movies I like to work on, and just, what I seek out in my horror movies. Like, I love a good horror movie, but you know, another favorite of mine is Drag Me to Hell, because it's so big and fun, and there's jokes and scares, and I think I seek that out probably from. This is like a therapy session, man. Like probably
Yeah.
from. Thank you for this revelation. Like probably from that Jurassic Park experience, I'm seeking those things out in a lot of everything else that I work on or or watch.
Right.
So yeah,
See, and thank you for watching Sledgehammer Therapy. Bill's in the mail. Before I let you go, though, Andrew, I do want to remind everybody because we're at the end of the third act, guys. The credits are about to roll, the curtain's about to drop, and those violins are about to swell. But before that happens, like I said at the beginning, make sure you're following Andrew on social media so you can stay up to date, not only on the projects that he's currently working on, but everything he's going to be working on in the future. Those links are down in the description. Andrew, please don't go anywhere, my friend. I got a couple more questions for you. Everyone else, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. It really helps to build our channel more than you know. And follow Sledgehammer Horror on social media. Our links are down in the description as well. But until next time, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.